A young couple had excitedly planned to attend a friend's birthday party, but when they failed to show up, their absence raised alarm bells and prompted a call to the police. What initially appeared to be a straightforward missing persons case rapidly escalated into one of the most unsettling investigations in recent history. The details were so chilling that even some of the detectives involved found it necessary to seek therapy, as nothing could have equipped them for the grim truths they were about to uncover. Channon Christian was born on April 29, 1985 in Texas. When she was 12, her family relocated to Knoxville, Tennessee, where she adjusted to life with her parents and older brother. Channon had a remarkable ability to make friends quickly. She was outgoing, friendly, and always eager to lend a hand. She seamlessly integrated into her new school as if she had always belonged there. People who knew her often remarked on her ability to connect with just about anyone. Her warmth and kindness were significant influences on her future aspirations. Channon was driven by a desire to do something meaningful, something that would positively impact others. After graduating high school, she chose to enroll at the University of Tennessee to study sociology. One reason for this choice was her wish to remain close to her family, with whom she shared a deep bond. Staying nearby felt natural to her, yet she was equally determined to cultivate her independence. To support herself during college, she took on 2 part-time jobs. During her time at the university, she met a guy named Chris Newsom. Channon and Chris quickly hit it off and began dating. At the time, Channon was 21 years old, and Chris, 23, worked as a carpenter. Despite his youth, Chris had already established a strong reputation in the community. On January 6, 2007, they were looking forward to a friend's birthday party. Earlier that afternoon, Channon visited her friend's house, where Chris was supposed to pick her up shortly. However, he was running a bit late. Given the circumstances, Channon and her friend decided to wait at the house for Chris to arrive, instead of heading to the party right away. Meanwhile, Chris had dropped off another friend at the same event and was on his way to pick up Channon. About an hour later, concern gripped the people at the party, as neither Channon nor Chris had arrived. Although Channon was only about a 10-minute drive away, it didn't add up. Her friends speculated that perhaps their plans had changed. However, something felt off, as it was unusual for them to skip a close friend's birthday without a word. After waiting a while longer and receiving no response from their attempts to call, their anxiety escalated. By the time midnight approached, a few friends decided to drive over to the apartment complex where Channon had been waiting. Upon arriving at the parking lot, they noticed Chris's truck was present, but Shannon's car, the one she had driven earlier, was missing. This led their friends to assume that the couple had chosen to skip the party without informing anyone and had gone off to celebrate together instead. Earlier that evening, Channon had called her mother, letting her know that she would be home later than expected. She mentioned that she and Chris planned to grab a bite to eat and watch a movie, assuring her mom she would return around 3:30 in the morning. However, that time came and went without Shannon's arrival. At first, her mother thought it was possible Channon had spent the night at a friend's house or at Chris's place, so she didn't panic immediately. But by the next morning, things took a worrying turn. Just then, she received a call that changed everything. Channon's boss informed her that Channon hadn't shown up for work that day. Concerned, Channon's mom reached out to Chris's parents, only to discover that he hadn't returned home the previous night either. With neither Channon nor Chris answering their phones, both families were now deeply worried. Their friends also couldn't get in touch with them, which only amplified the anxiety of the situation. Although Channon and Chris were adults, they usually kept their parents updated. It was unlike them to just vanish without a word. Channon was dedicated to her job, and there was no way she would miss a shift without a compelling reason. As worry mounted, their families began calling every hospital in the area for information. Despite their efforts, no one matching Channon and Chris's descriptions had been admitted to any local hospitals. Feeling helpless, the families reached out to the police for assistance, but the local department was unwilling to take action immediately. They explained that because both Channon and Chris were adults, the families would need to wait 24 hours before they could file a missing persons report. However, Shannon's family wasn't willing to sit idly by. They contacted her phone company in the hopes of tracing her phone's last activity. To their surprise, the company agreed to cooperate. They discovered that Channon had checked her voicemail 3 times during the night, marking the last recorded activity on her phone before it turned off. The final signal had pinged from a cell tower located near North Cherry Street. As the search for Channon continued, her parents grew increasingly anxious. Knoxville typically had a reputation for safety, yet the area where her phone last pinged was notorious for its high crime rates. It baffled them as to why Channon would have been there. Determined to uncover the truth, her family decided to search the neighborhood for themselves. After several hours of driving around, they finally spotted her car parked just a couple of blocks away from the last known location of her phone. Upon reaching the vehicle, a feeling of dread washed over them. All of Shannon's belongings were gone, her photos, phone charger, and everything else she usually kept with her. The interior of the car was uncharacteristically dirty, a stark contrast to Shannon's usual fastidiousness. She always maintained a spotless vehicle. The unsettling discoveries only deepened their anxiety. The driver's seat was pushed all the way back, indicating that someone much taller had been behind the wheel. It was clear that Channon hadn't been the one driving. After this alarming revelation, her parents contacted the police again, and this time the officers responded quickly. Upon arriving at the scene, they observed several deeply concerning details. The interior of the car and the door handles had been meticulously wiped clean, as if someone was attempting to erase any fingerprints. Furthermore, there was an additional item that raised alarms: a crumpled, empty pack of cigarettes found inside the car. The issue was that neither Channon nor Chris smoked, which suggested that the car could very well have been stolen. While searching the car, investigators were still puzzled about the whereabouts of Channon and Chris. However, they eventually uncovered a significant lead: an envelope wedged between the seats. This envelope contained the address of a house located in the same neighborhood, an intriguing clue. Forensics soon discovered a fingerprint on the envelope, which quickly matched that of LaMarcus Davidson, a convicted felon with an extensive criminal record. Further investigation revealed that Davidson resided at the address listed on the envelope. Detectives rushed to the house, operating under the suspicion that Channon and Chris might be in immediate danger. They had legal grounds to enter the house. Upon entering without a warrant, they were greeted by the sight of a messy interior. However, the police quickly spotted Shannon's purse, her shoes, and several other personal belongings. In addition, they found Chris's baseball cap and his driver's license. But the most horrifying discovery awaited them in the kitchen. When one of the officers lifted the lid of the trash can, he uncovered something wrapped in a piece of cloth. Beneath it lay a human body, Channon. At that moment, the case was promptly categorized as a homicide investigation. Detectives were now focused on two urgent questions: where was Chris, and where was LaMarcus Davidson? They didn't have to wait long for one of the answers. Right after Channon's body was discovered, police received information from another department indicating that nearly 2 days prior, a railroad employee had found the body of an unidentified man near the train tracks. At that time, the man could not be identified, but detectives now suspected he might be Chris. Soon, a DNA test would confirm their worst fears. The examination of both Channon and Chris's bodies revealed a truly horrifying scene. Each had sustained numerous injuries, including cuts, bruises, and clear signs of abuse. It was evident that both had been sexually assaulted. Chris's death was attributed to multiple gunshot wounds, while the cause of Channon's death was still being determined. Channon's cause of death was determined to be suffocation. Forensic experts uncovered biological evidence on her body that matched LaMarcus Davidson, and his fingerprints were found on the trash bags used to wrap her remains. Additionally, investigators discovered spent shell casings at Davidson's residence, which corresponded to the bullets recovered from Chris's body. With this substantial evidence, police were confident in LaMarcus's direct involvement in the murders, prompting them to concentrate all their efforts on locating him. Detectives scrutinized his cell phone records and found that, in the days leading up to the murders, LaMarcus had been in frequent communication with a man named. It didn't take long for the police to locate Eric. Initially, he insisted that he had no knowledge of LaMarcus's whereabouts. However, the investigators informed him of the serious allegations against LaMarcus, explaining that Eric could potentially face charges as an accomplice. Faced with this reality, he quickly shifted his stance and provided them with an address. According to Eric, LaMarcus had been hiding in an abandoned house that was currently for sale. He also revealed that on the very day Channon and Chris went missing, they had both robbed that same location. Police proceeded to the house, and sure enough, they found LaMarcus inside, surrounded by debris and empty food containers. Impressively, he was armed with a gun, but what caught their attention even more was that he was wearing Chris's sneakers. Officers took LaMarcus in for questioning, and from the start, he denied any involvement in the incident. However, as the interrogation progressed, he began to change his story repeatedly. In total, he provided investigators with 5 distinct versions of the events, each one contradicting the previous account. Initially, he claimed he had no knowledge of what anyone was talking about. Then he shifted his narrative, suggesting that Channon and Chris had been kidnapped by someone else and insisted he played no part in it. Later on, he told detectives that he had used the victim's car to drive around and sell drugs. Although LaMarcus never confessed, he provided police with some valuable information. Based on his statements, it became increasingly evident that there might have been multiple individuals involved in the murders. According to LaMarcus, his half-brother Latavis and their mutual friend George were the real killers. Detectives agreed that this theory made the most sense, and that more than one person might have been involved in the murders. They quickly tracked down both Latavis and George, bringing them in for questioning along with Eric, who was now also considered an accomplice. None of the men were eager to confess, but during the interrogations, police uncovered intriguing information. It became evident that all four suspects likely played a role in the crime, and they weren't acting alone. Investigators discovered a fifth individual involved, an 18-year-old woman named Vanessa. Detectives located her and took her into custody. With all five suspects now in custody, the interrogation proceeded. Under pressure, they began to turn on one another, pointing fingers and weaving stories that deflected blame. Despite their inconsistent narratives, the mounting evidence allowed the detectives to reconstruct the events of that night with greater clarity. From the information collected, it appeared that LaMarcus was the ringleader of the group, primarily involved in drug dealing. On that particular night, his intent was to steal a car to facilitate his deliveries. He had enlisted the help of three accomplices, along with Vanessa, as they ventured out in search of the ideal vehicle. As they navigated through a residential complex, the very one where Channon was waiting, they caught sight of her car, with her sitting inside. Chris was standing beside it, and in that moment, they decided to escalate their plan, not just to steal the vehicle, but to abduct the couple as well. They forced Channon and Chris into the car at gunpoint and drove them to LaMarcus's house. According to DNA evidence, both LaMarcus and Latavis committed assaults on the victims, inflicting abuse that lasted for hours. In addition to this, they subjected the couple to other forms of torture and humiliation. By early morning, the attackers led Chris out of the house and took him to the railroad tracks, where they shot him multiple times. The attackers left Chris's body at the railroad tracks before returning to the house to continue tormenting Channon, who was alive for nearly 2 full days. During that time, her friends and family began searching for her, although her car remained unfound. Eventually, they also murdered Channon and disposed of her body by stuffing it into a trash can, leaving it behind in the house. Meanwhile, investigators learned that LaMarcus had not only stolen Chris's sneakers, but had also taken his phone and some of Channon's personal belongings, which he later gifted to his girlfriend. In the midst of this, Vanessa claimed to be a victim as well, insisting that she was held in the house against her will. However, police subsequently discovered a diary in her home. However, evidence emerged that completely contradicted her claims. Vanessa's diary revealed a very different narrative. She described the day as a wild adventure and expressed that she genuinely enjoyed the experience. In the aftermath, all suspects faced a lengthy list of charges, prompting the prosecution to begin preparations for trial. It took over 2 years to finalize the proceedings, during which time the defense attorneys succeeded in moving the trial to a different county. The rationale behind this change was straightforward. The case had sparked intense public outrage. In Knoxville, the community was horrified by what had happened to the young couple, and the defense argued that securing a fair trial for their clients was impossible in such a charged atmosphere. Ultimately, the court agreed and the trial venue was relocated. Eric was the first to stand trial. Throughout the investigation, police struggled to find definitive evidence linking him directly to the murders. However, they did uncover sufficient evidence to demonstrate that he was aware of the crimes being committed. Consequently, he was sentenced to the maximum penalty of 18 years in prison. Next, the trials of LaMarcus, Latavis, and George commenced. In a desperate bid to defend them, their attorney argued that Channon and Chris had willingly participated in the horrific abuse they endured. The jury, however, saw through this implausible claim and quickly found all 3 men guilty. LaMarcus received a death sentence, while Latavis and George were handed life sentences in prison. Vanessa's situation was more complex. Initially, she had been offered immunity in return for her testimony against the others. However, the court later determined that this immunity applied solely to the carjacking charges and did not extend to the charges associated with murder and sexual assault. Consequently, Vanessa faced a trial where she was ultimately convicted and sentenced to 53 years in prison. In the end, all those responsible were held accountable for their actions. Yet shortly after the verdicts were delivered, the case took an unexpected turn. In 2011, the judge overseeing all 5 trials resigned amid a scandal. It was revealed that the judge had been engaging in an affair with a court employee and had been purchasing illegal drugs from criminals. Consequently, a higher court decided to re-examine several sentences he had issued, including those involving LaMarcus, Vanessa George, and Latavius. The news incited significant outrage, which was understandable. Ultimately, prosecutors successfully contested the decisions related to LaMarcus and Latavius, leaving their original sentences intact. However, Vanessa and George were granted new trials. During the retrial, Vanessa was again found guilty of the same offenses, but received a reduced sentence of 35 years, down from 53 years. Similarly, George also received a lighter sentence. The retrials of Vanessa and George had far-reaching consequences. During these new proceedings, the prosecution gathered substantial new evidence indicating that Eric had, in fact, played an active role in the abuse and murders. As a result, in 2019, he faced new charges and was sentenced to life in prison, along with an additional 90 years. This marked a stark contrast to his original sentence of just 18 years, effectively eliminating any chance he had of ever being released. Conversely, Vanessa became eligible for parole after serving only 7 years. Despite her efforts to secure her release, all of Vanessa's parole requests have thus far been denied, and she continues to remain behind bars. In the face of numerous obstacles, those responsible for this crime were eventually held accountable and received significant prison sentences. Yet many believe that each of them deserves the death penalty. The brutal nature of this crime not only shook Knoxville, but sent shockwaves across the entire nation. People struggled to fathom how anyone could commit such a cruel and inhuman act. The house where these horrific events took place was eventually purchased by a local company, which then tore it down. In its place, a memorial was constructed to honor Channon and Chris, and the University of Tennessee also established scholarships in their names, initiatives that continue to be active today. Additionally, it is important to note that nearly 20 years after the murders, LaMarcus's death sentence remains unexecuted as he continues to sit on death row.